without further ado, say a very good morning over in Washington, D.C. to Mr. and Dr., I should say, Sebastian Gorka. Sebastian, how you doing?
Good, Mike. And before we talk about my old boss, first things first, I saw the clip of you and your colleague when you announced the passing of Bean. Can I just comment on the way you handled that? The genuineness of your emotions was very moving, Mike.
It was a very shocking moment, and as I said at the time, I didn't really expect to have that reaction, but you can't help, you can't help it. She was an incredible woman, and I think in that moment, I thought of her as my own mother and the mother of the nation almost.
Well, you did a beautiful job there,
Well, thank
Mike.
you. That's very kind. Before we go on, Sebastian, I want to just play a little clip from Sean Hannity's show last night on Fox. He interviewed Donald Trump, and this is what happened.
They took your passport, they took your medical records, they took your tax records, and probably the scariest part to me, and this is why a broad warrant like this to me would be dangerous. We do have a Fourth Amendment. They also took, 500 pages of attorney-client privilege information. Have you gotten that back, by the way?
A lot. I don't know. I really don't know. They took a lot. I think they took my will.
What was your involvement in the process? Did you ever...
Not much of an involvement, other than we had boxes. And again, many of these boxes had other things, many newspapers, literally massive amounts of newspapers and pictures. But there were a lot of boxes for a lot of different things. But they actually wrote a letter, thank you very much for your cooperation, effectively. And we were doing that, which is exactly what we're supposed to do based on the Presidential Records Act. If you look at the law or the act or whatever, the Presidential Records Act, it basically said everything that we were doing, we should be doing.
Donald Trump there speaking to Sean Hannity on Fox, an exclusive interview. Sebastian, they're never going to give up with this mad witch hunt, wild goose chase, are they?
Look at the last 6 years. I mean, just look at the last 6 years in this man. Whether it was impeachment twice, whether it was the FBI Mueller probe, whether it was originally the Southern District of New York trying to bring criminal cases against him, which they had to drop after a few months, whether it is the January 6th witch hunt show trial committee of Nancy Pelosi in Congress. I mean, it goes on and on and on. This is, as Lord Conrad Black, the former owner of the Hollinger Group, is a regular on my show, and he commented, this is the most, and he's a presidential historian as well, by the way, he said this is the most investigated man in American politics. Yeah. Forget, Nixon. This man has been more investigated than anybody, and on top of that, he is the most innocent. Why? Because they've investigated him ad nauseum for 6 years, and he's never been charged and convicted of anything. And even the impeachments failed in the Senate. So this is where you realize the phrase TDS, or Trump derangement syndrome, isn't just funny, isn't just a little kind of, amusing quip. It's real. And when you find out Letitia James, who is shockingly the Attorney General of New York, if you look at her campaign videos, if you see these surreptitiously or informally taken iPhone videos of her, she's railing against the man even before she becomes the Attorney General, saying, my mission is to take Donald Trump down.
Yeah.
Well, it would be to uphold the law and prosecute criminals.
It's incredible, isn't it? And I mean, I don't know how familiar you are with the 1980s soul music, but you might as well be prosecuted by Rick James rather than by this Letitia James woman, because, having failed miserably to find a criminal charge that she can bring, she's now bringing a civil lawsuit. I mean, I'm amazed that's even legal in the United States.
But you have to read what it is, what we're charging him with. This is a New York real estate mogul, okay? That's years, and she's saying, we think he may have overvalued some of his properties. What, in New York?
Yeah.
Nobody's done that, right? Nobody's done that in New York. And this is the guy who owns Turnberry, who owns St. This it's just a mark of desperation.
Yeah.
When you've got nothing else, when you look at the state of the economy, the inflation, illegal immigration, you just come after the man ad hominem with stuff that you made up that's spurious. It is a mark of desperation of the left, because you know what, Mike, and hopefully I'm not breaking news here, he's running. My old boss is going to run, and if we have a fair election, he's just going to stroll back into the White House. The state of the nation.
I know. And all these bozos, right, are so desperate to try and find some way of stopping that from happening. They can't win the election, so they're trying to stop him from being able to take part in the election, right? And as you said, you think they might be a bit more concerned about the 2 million illegal migrants coming over the Mexican border, for God's sake, that they don't know where they are.
But it's okay. I'm sure you guys followed the news in the UK. We now have a border. The border has been reinstated, but only in Martha's Vineyard. So 48 illegals are flying a private jet, and within 48 hours, the National Guard is called out by the Democrats of Massachusetts, and they are deported off the fancy island to a military base. I mean, this is the rank hypocrisy of these people who are so tolerant and lovey-dovey and empathetic. Hey, call the military, get these colored people off our island.
Yeah. I know. Incredible, isn't it? The hypocrisy is quite breathtaking from these idiots. And as I say, I mean, let's talk a little bit before we continue with Donald Trump. The New York Times had the gall and the absolute shame to publish a piece in the week that we were in mourning in this country, decrying Britain as literally a kind of racist nation, as a tradition of slavery. I mean, that's just unbelievable. Then they had to apologise. That's how useless they are.
Yeah, as my friend Andrew Clavin, a great podcast here in the US, says, the New York Times, a former newspaper.
Yes.
But if you haven't used it, you've got to get the clip, I'm sure you have, of the British historian, Hilary Fordham, I think it is, on Don Lemon's show.
Yes, I've seen that.
And he's saying, well, she's still lying in state. She's still lying in state. And then he talks about reparations for slavery. And in only the way a Brit can, she just skewers him, saying, yes, we need reparations. I think this is a good idea, especially from the black Africans that sold their fellow Africans to the slave traders. And we need reparations for the families of the 2,000 British naval officers and NCOs who died stopping slavery. So John Lemon sits there like a cretin. That's...
Yeah. I mean, it really is pathetic, isn't it? Quite extraordinary. And some of the women who wrote pieces as well in America, these professors, who are the real racists, the ones who literally not only wished harm on members of the royal family, but wished that the Queen had a horrible death. I mean, what sort of people are these?
Yeah, it's these are the people who we have to take America back from. These are the people who have to be roundly trounced in the next election here in and then in 2024 when we bring back President Trump. But can I just say something as a former Brit who grew up in England? I watched your coverage, and it's just, there was something stunning about, we are distracted by social media, the strange whatever topic of the day, the distraction of the day. And then the whole nation just focused on a life of service. And even when discussing the details of the movement of the coffin and the lying in, we had the media talk about things we don't usually talk about, like death and dealing with death and tradition and history. It tells you why these things are so important. Whether you're not a monarchist or Republican doesn't matter. You're focusing on the bedrock values of not just the UK, but of a civilization. And I have to say, hats off to everybody involved in not just the coverage, but how that beautiful series of ceremonies. It really, it's the best of the best of the UK. Sorry,
it really was. No, listen, thank you for saying that. But you're right. I mean, it made us all terribly proud to be British. It made us also remember what being British is actually all about. Forget about the LGBT flags and, the clapping for the NHS and all of that nonsense. You know, this is what we do, and this is what we're about. And everybody had a story, everybody had an emotional response to it. Let me just ask you one final question, Sebastian. What is going on with the Mar-a-Lago raid? I mean, is anything happening? Are they doing anything about it?
It's stunning. So thankfully, the president's attorneys, his lawyers, were provided a recourse to a special master. So this is like an independent ombudsman that comes in and says, okay, let me see the thousands of documents the FBI raided from you, and I'll decide whether these are genuinely matters of national security or why on earth you took his passports and his medical records. Then late last night, the DOJ won their appeal to continue the criminal investigation on President Trump while the master is looking at the documents, which should never happen. But the bottom line is what you heard at the beginning of that interview. We have a written constitution. There are Fourth Amendment rights in there, which means you cannot have a general search warrant, which means a fishing search warrant. That means you go into somebody's home and you look for whatever you want until you find something that could be criminal. You're not allowed to do that. You have to say to the judge, we think he did this crime, and this is the thing we are looking for. That's not what's in the warrant, and that's why the DOJ doesn't want a special master, doesn't want to know everything they took, because they are looking. It's like Leventi Beria, the former precursor to the KGB, famously said, show me the man and I will find you the crime.
Yes.
American. That's what they're trying to
It's a fishing expedition par excellence, but I suspect what they won't find is anything that they can do anything with. Otherwise, they would have found it by now. So, you know, they're just right?
No, Mike, it would have leaked. If there already was a nuclear secret, it would have leaked to the Washington Post and the Times. And the fact that it hasn't in the last 5 weeks tells you they have nothing.
Yeah, you got nothing. It's a bit like, I'm not in any way making the comparison, it's a bit like the line in The Untouchable, you got nothing. You don't got the bookkeeper, you got nothing. Anyway, listen, thank you very much indeed, Sebastian Gorka, reporting in from Washington, D.C.